Welcome, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of the mighty Jupiter through the quick-witted, fleet-footed sign of Gemini. This begins on the 25th or the 26th of May, depending on where you live, and goes on through to June the 9th, 2025. Jupiter only visits each sign around about every 12 years. The last time he visited Gemini was across 2012 to 2013. And before that, from millennium year 2000 through to 2001. The sign of Gemini, the host, it's an air sign. It's very much about quick exchanges of ideas. It's a very fresh and stimulating sign, and things do get shared quickly. So it's perfect for the social media age that we live in. But of course, Jupiter is a planet which governs two other zodiac signs of Sagittarius and Pisces. And in Sagittarius, it's about higher knowledge, philosophy, even higher education. And therefore, being in the sign of Gemini, it's opposing the sign of Sagittarius, but squaring Pisces, where Jupiter's influence is very much about the spiritual domain, the expansion of knowledge to do with not necessarily what we can see, but more what we sense. So, therefore, Jupiter in Gemini is detrimented. But there's a supreme irony as Jupiter arrives in the sign of Gemini, because although this may not be its best host in some ways, the welcoming committee is sensational. And I can't wait to share that with you. So please stay with me for more. I'm going to share with you the light that comes with Jupiter, but also the shadow. I'm going to share with you the aspects that Jupiter forges as he arrives, and they are sensational. One of them, the first time for over 200 years. And then I'm going to go through each of the 12 signs, from Aries through to Pisces, to tell you what you can expect for your ascendant, or your sun, or your moon over the next 12 months. New to my channel, it's great to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. Now, as I've been sharing recently, an awful lot of people who watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help to grow the channel and hit that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. Every time I drop a video, you'll get an alert. Now, if you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, I've been writing these for near to 30 years. I also feature each day the overriding primary astrological influence, so we can all relate to that and understand the big picture, as well as then read the zodiac forecast. Please see beneath this video the link to subscribe, or go to www.patrickarundell.com/subscribe. I'm also a consulting astrologer. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. I don't edit these as they come in, I share them as is. See what people have found and experienced working with me. Also, if you're a patron, I truly appreciate the support you've given me. If you would like to get the Jupiter factoid that I have prepared, you can do so by becoming a patron. But if you want to become a patron and then decide to cancel somewhere down the line, that's fine. You can still get access to that brilliant Jupiter factoid. Please see the link below for more. So Jupiter in Gemini is detrimented. But on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart from a solar perspective, which puts Jupiter in house 3, the sign of Gemini, which of course is an air sign. It's mutable and it's very quick moving. But look, as he enters at the position of Venus. Jupiter in traditional astrology is the greater benefic and very much to do with positivity, good fortune, serendipity. But Venus is also the planet of fortune, but known as the lesser benefit. But the two are together. This is extraordinary. So as this event occurs, this will provide a backdrop, this duo, for the next year. And you can see that the Sun is pretty close to the position of Venus and also of Jupiter. If this was a natal chart, it would be considered to be particularly fortuitous, despite the fact that Jupiter is technically detrimented. Also, I like to challenge the essential dignities, because the essential dignities were developed many, many moons ago, when social media didn't exist. If ever there was a sign that governed social media, it's certainly Gemini, perhaps Aquarius as well, which just reminds me to say, look at the position of Pluto up there in house 11. Yes, it is in retrograde now and will reverse back into Capricorn in universal time on the 1st of September, but it will come back into Aquarius on the 20th of November for many years. But that link between Pluto and Jupiter is particularly powerful. When I work with clients, or if you look at the charts of anyone very successful, Jupiter and Pluto are always forging very positive angles, and you can't get any more positive than the trine. So this is 120 degrees, and angles trigger energy. So what we have is the potency of Pluto, the transformational energy of Pluto, but also the connectivity to us all, because we are a community. That energy suggests that the way we interact with one another over the next year is going to be really important. And because Venus is also being influenced by Pluto, that's going to make us much more aware of the value of our relationships, but also the value of ourselves, but particularly the value of our ideas, because the sign of Gemini is about those quick ideas, the quick consumption of information. Now, the sign of Sagittarius, which Jupiter rules along with Pisces, is about the big picture. So it's about downloading philosophy. It can be to do with international affairs, but very much to do with history and culture. So the tomb of knowledge that's created by Jupiter's influence of Sagittarius is phenomenal. But the consumption of information that will come through Gemini will be quick and fast, but very exciting. Could be very lucky, particularly if you're an early born air sign, so Gemini, Libra or Aquarius. You could have genuinely quite a fortuitous following year. But there's something more than this, because if we think about the way the news cycle works these days, a lot of individual publishers are now finding it more and more difficult to connect with their audience. Why is that? Well, print has pretty well died out. You know, you can still just about buy print, but it's a much smaller percentage of the way people consume information. And also because all those publishers are trying to compete at the top of the search rankings, it gets more difficult there as well. And it doesn't matter what political persuasion they are. There are two major digital providers who have the real power, and you know who I'm referring to. And they have decided to stop aggregating news, which is a scandal. So we can talk about different political things in the world in terms of international affairs that may really anger us, but we really need to be aware that we're being blocked from consuming what we want to consume, because it's so difficult for publishers to reach us, because the intermediary is holding all the levers of power. Pluto, levers of power. Venus, money, levers of power. Jupiter can also be the propagation of dogma. So it's important not to think that just because Jupiter comes into Gemini, which can be fun, flirty, quirky, quick-witted, changeable, that we just see it as some kind of playful event, that there's all going to be a good side to it. This particular event, I can tell you, activates the chart of the People's Republic of China in quite a concerning way. So I have mentioned this earlier in the year. We know that Jupiter can be about borders and boundaries. We know that Uranus being hosted in Taurus has also been very disrupted in that regard. So it's important not to think that Jupiter moving into Gemini is going to be the panacea. And it's all going to be wonderful, as you may watch elsewhere through this platform. Because Jupiter's been moving through Taurus, are we all suddenly better off after the last 12 months? I think not. And it's important, therefore, to look at the light, but also the shade of what Jupiter brings, particularly in the host sign, which can be a little bit gossipy. We know that the third house can be how we interact with neighbours, siblings in our local community. And I feel that there is a genuine opportunity for a renaissance of community through this event, which would be marvellous. But let's look at the whole map. Let's look at the position of the moon. That's detrimented too in Capricorn. Let's look at the position of the sun and the moon divided by 2, and that pitches up in Pisces. But guess what? That midpoint is conjunct Saturn. Saturn in the 12th house of the overall chart is our collective fear. Saturn is very much about boundaries, limitations, the cycles of time. It can be about karma, but remember, Saturn is coming to the end of its whole cycle. So its journey through Pisces, it's going to go into Aries briefly in 2025. It's its culmination period. So this is where all the things that have unfolded with all of us, and obviously Saturn can be repressive and restrictive and cold and limiting. But what we've seen, for example, in Britain recently is a narrative from the government that people who claim benefits for illnesses are bad people because they're exploiting the system and they don't deserve to do it. That's the coldness of Saturn exploiting the vulnerable, the 12th house. So we mustn't think that this event is going to be utterly amazing for everyone without any challenge. So Saturn, along with that midpoint, is actually in a square with the part of fortune, which, guess what? Like Jupiter, Venus and the Sun, is also in Gemini. So in the Second World War, they used to have a saying, and it was loose talk costs lives. But I feel that we all have a personal responsibility to use our comments on digital platforms with care. In the old days, we'd write into the newspaper and they'd have all the power and they might decide to publish our letter. Probably most of the time they didn't. Now everybody can get their voice heard, but the problem with that, it makes everybody have an enormous amount of power, but we have to use power with care, responsibly. That freedom comes with obligations. So I feel that one of the things that is going to come up over the next year is the whole concept of the post-truth age we live in. Because Jupiter can be about dogma, it's possible that what's occurring more and more because of the control of the news cycle by those two big platforms, that less and less information reaches us in the way we want. So what we can do is we can search for information which confirms our bias. So we can go to the publisher direct, who, basically understands our instincts. Of course, that's always happened, but there's going to be much less other information competing for our attention. So what we do is just continue to confirm our prejudice. And that's the danger, to be honest. For all of us, we need to continually question why we think and why we believe in the way we do, and always ask ourselves, is this factually true? Because this post-truth age, which, let's be honest about it, there's a very big country in the eastern part of this world that's imposing a very, very brutal war on a neighbour who are past masters at a post-truth age. So they're probably the people who almost invented it. Now, it's not to say that propaganda has never existed or selective presentation of different facts. We could all do it. If we have a falling out with someone and someone asks us about it, do we say word for word what happened, or do we give an edited form which suits our agenda. So we all need to be conscious of that, because the exuberance of Jupiter and the combination with Venus can make us a bit lazy, and it could make us a bit insincere, to be honest, because Venus's rulership of Libra can be about presenting things as we want to be seen rather than the gritty reality. So that square between Saturn, the midpoint, and the part of fortune says use our language, use our expression of what we think and what we say with care, because each one of us can influence things. It's like litter. If we walk around and we see something blowing down the street and we pick it up and put it in the bin, that's a good thing to do. We took responsibility. The person who chucked it on the floor and didn't think twice is not taking responsibility. But as individual citizens, we can make a difference. But we do need to be aware, seriously aware, that control of information is a massive problem. It really, truly is. So that's how I see the overall chart in a fairly stripped down form. Let's look at those aspects in a bit more detail. So first of all, let's explore the light side of Jupiter. So of course it's about optimism. Of course it's about growth, expansion, can be positivity. And of course that serendipity, those strokes of good fortune and luck. But it can also be very much to do with travel. Distribution as well, that can get forgotten. I come from a distribution background, so that's something that really chimes with me. But philosophy, higher principles, higher education, and of course through its interaction with borders, international affairs. Now it's also very much to do with publishing, which is why what I was saying is so important, because Gemini is about the quick consumption of information. Great for things like, well, you know, that platform that we all enjoy watching funny stuff on, but not so good if we want to draw down the facts. And even big platforms like the BBC, which used to have quite a good reputation for dissembling news in a fair and just way, have got a terribly affected reputation because they're so fearful of losing the license money from the government. They can't really reflect opinion. And do they really reflect fact? Well, they probably do, but more selectively. And do we get a full range of reporting on all the things that are going on? No, they choose. So we do need to be aware that publishing is an important part of this journey over the next year. But Jupiter can also be about self-belief in some ways, because that inner confidence that's part of Jupiter, when it's really working and it's on fire. So the host, Sagittarius, a fire sign. So Jupiter's on fire. That conviction can really be fantastic. But what about the shadow side? Well, we're talking about exaggeration, bluster. We can talk about intellectual arrogance. We can talk about dogma. And in terms of international affairs, we're seeing dogma, a particular ultra-nationalistic governments. I'm not talking about governments that are concerned about the things in their homelands and speaking to their internal citizens. I'm talking about the big governments who actually want to have more power. In a way, they're always saying about the imperialism that used to be imposed by countries like the United Kingdom, France, and so forth in the past, but they're actually the new imperialists. It's incredible. And so that might is right attitude, watch out for it. Jupiter in Gemini is not all going to be a bag of fun. And also overconfidence, and I'm now going to say something that we all may need to be mindful of, is overweight. Because with the combination with Venus, the love of consuming calorific goodies is not going to be dimmed over the next year. But seriously, the chance to have social interactions in a way with others, with Jupiter's conjunction to Venus, is really turned up to max. And it can be an extremely warm and sociable combination, this. And we know that Gemini likes to interact, mix and mingle, so why not? And the more that we can step outside, get away in some ways from the dominance of our digitally dominated lives and have those personal connections. That's a really great thing to do, and the affection of Venus can be amplified by the power of Jupiter. Did you know that Jupiter in size is as big as all the other planets joined together times 2? It's huge, Jupiter. It's absolutely colossal. It's also in Roman mythology known as Zeus. So if you'd like to, as I mentioned, learn more about Jupiter and all its factoids, you can download it by becoming a Patreon. Now, romantic encounters are often seen as being the domain of Venus. Venus for me is much more to do with our self-worth, our values, money. It can be obviously to do with sensuality. The relating side of Venus comes more from its journey through the sign of Libra. And there it does want to get an equilibrium between what we want to give and what we want to get. So Venus in Gemini can be flirt central, there's no doubt about that. But if you are someone who enjoys writing, or you're a comedian, or you have your own blog, or you want to start your own business in your local community, or you are someone who wants to interact with people online by writing an absolutely brilliant app, well, you really could do very well with this combination. But as I say, the temptation to overindulge is definitely going to be there. But of course, because Venus can be about intimacy, it could lead to some brief but rather enthusiastic encounters that may not necessarily stick around because of the mutability of Gemini. So be aware if you are looking for a relationship, with the exception, I should stress, of Sagittarius people, because it will be your 7th house, and Aquarius people, it'll be your 5th house. But seriously, we just need to push back against this principle that every time Jupiter moves a zodiac sign, everything's going to be absolutely marvellous, because it's just not real. Jupiter's combination with the Sun could be very good because that can reinforce our physical well-being. And if your nervous system has been taking a little bit of pounding with all the stresses and strains that we've gone through with the hiking prices of fuel and food and property and accommodation costs, and before that COVID, the great thing is that Jupiter combining to the Sun at the start of this journey suggests if we can connect more, it can be very reaffirming in terms of our physical vitality. Also, the great thing about Jupiter and the Sun is it can give us an inner sense that things can get better. My wife was telling me that the brain has a way of almost forgetting trauma. So if we have a big injury, we break an arm or we have an accident, there's part of the brain that can compensate us so we almost forget about it. Of course, we know that psychologically things can get offset and come back to haunt us if we don't process and decompress things properly. But essentially the brain is very clever. But here I feel that as long as we don't overdo things, this combination of energy is very positive, but we do need to use our words, our self-expression, our beliefs wisely, understand that the sign of Gemini, not for any bad reason, can be so quick moving that it doesn't always take the time to analyze things carefully, and that could tempt us at times to trivialize things, be a little bit insincere, say what we think people want to hear rather than staying with what's true. And that's where Pluto is such a supporting influence. And for the first time in over 220 years, it's feeding into that angle to Jupiter, to Venus, to the Sun. It's absolutely glorious. And that gives us an opportunity, therefore, for a big reset, because Pluto is the planet in Aquarius, which is really transforming all of our connected experiences. So our communication, our connection, very, very important. It is a chance when we can see new ways and find more positive ways of connecting, but we also just need to know that Jupiter, like every planet, and Gemini, like every zodiac sign, has its downside. It's not all up. I'm now going to go through each of the 12 signs to share with you a flavour of what you can expect over the next year. I just also want to tell you about the retrograde period. So that's from the 9th of October at 21 degrees, and Jupiter continues to rewind right into 2025. It doesn't go direct until February the 4th at 11 degrees and 18. So we're seeing an inversion there of, what is that, about 9, 10, about 11 degrees itself. So there's a 11, near to an 11 degree inversion. And that retrograde slows things down. So during that 4-month period, that's the time that we need to be particularly mindful of that whole concept of being, as much as we can, very careful with what we say, what we write, what we publish, what we believe, being more desirous of cutting through the white noise of information that bombards us to get to the nuggets that have true depth and true meaning, because that's Jupiter at its absolute best. And just be aware, craven voices or people seeking your attention, or perhaps even your vote, because what they say, we really need to understand very carefully that what they're saying is for a reason, and that reason is power. So stick out for the people that you encounter that really are great fun to be with, that lift you energetically, that are light, that enjoy a bit of fun and frivolity, very Gemini, but also chime as being genuine people, genuine for you. And also those little thoughtful gestures, the third house, those quick communication. Oh, thank you for opening that door. Ah, is that what it is? Right, I'll put my change in the charity box at the till. It's only a few coppers or a few cents, but it will make a difference to someone, because Jupiter can be about benevolence. So as little thoughtful, important gestures, particularly around our immediate communities, anything to do with localism, is really going to be very much in vogue over the next year. Let's embrace it. I'm now going to go through each of the 12 signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect from Aries through to Pisces. But if you would like to go above zodiac astrology and understand the power of the planets in your personal life story, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, of time, date and place, I can produce for you your life roadmap report. This will give you searing insights into the patterns that have played out in your journey so far, but also a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those energies. In my special package of 30% off, you can get your 12-month transits, the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. But if you know your tropical natal chart really well, why not check out my draconic charts? Same package, draconic moves the north node to 0 degrees Aries, the vernal point, and this is our soul or karmic journey. This is the energy we bring into this life. The tropical natal chart is what we're likely going to experience within this life. But very often people find their draconic chart chimes with them more than their natal. My draconic sees the sun go from Aquarius, the moon to Gemini and Cancer. How about that? Gemini, I work in a communicational field, and my home, my family and my close associations are primarily important. So that draconic is really reflecting, and that's the power of draconic. Please see below for information on both options. So Aries, you've had some big events recently that have really been charging you up. The solar eclipse for sure, but that was countered by Mercury's retrograde, and also of course Mars and Saturn at that time were in your 12th house, really slowing you down and asking you to look backwards to clear up outstanding issues. Not so easy to be in the present. However, since then, you've had Mercury go direct and you've had Mars arrive in your sign and forge a stunning alliance to Pluto itself. Again, for the first time in over 200 years. So that's really, to use a Rolling Stones song, brings to mind of Start Me Up. It's really an ignition point for you. And yes, Saturn is going to continue in your 12th house, but what happens when Saturn makes its way through its around about 2.5 year journey through each sign. At first, it really tends to grip us and affect us in quite a challenging way. Then we start to really work with it, and by the end of each ingress through each sign, we've worked out what Saturn can teach us through that sign. And I feel you're in the process of working things out. So Jupiter, Venus, the Sun, the part of fortune, all being in your third house, well, things are really going to start to speed up for you. So some of the things that have made way, perhaps over the last year, perhaps in a very painful way, perhaps it has been to do with a personal relationship, perhaps it's been a career, a job, a connection with an organisation or a group of people. You're really now primed up to start me up, to really go again and take the initiative. And you're at your absolute best when you're downloading the fire energy of your sign, not analysing things so much, living in the moment and just going for it. So you're going to find yourself much more desirous of mixing and mingling. That's really been affected by the events of COVID for many of us. But I feel that you have a real sense of enthusiasm that's coming back into your situation. So remember, the third house can be flirty. The third house can rule technology. If you are someone who's okay with dating online and it's something you're, not saying it's an easy medium, but you're okay about using it, that could be an area where you can connect to people. But it doesn't have to be about romance. There are meetup groups as well. People can meet up to do different events, some of them cultural events. We don't always have to have a connection in terms of romance or sex, to be honest. So your community is going to become more enriching over the next year for you, but it is still very important to make sure that whoever you're interacting with, you are clear about what your expectations are and what the potential limitations could be, because that's what the experience of Saturn in the 12th house has really taught you to be much more mindful of. Now, Taurus, you're particularly lucky with this event because your ruler is in the mix at the start of the year. And remember, that event chart at the start of the year will prevail. So having Venus conjunct Jupiter, and of course you've had them conjunct in your sign on the 23rd, so the 23rd of May, so something that's been building up, that you've been working on, the individuality that has been blessed upon you by Uranus over the last 5 years has not necessarily been entirely easy. It could have been disruptive at times, but it's really asking you to get in contact with a more authentic part of yourself. It's not that you weren't being genuine before, but maybe you were conforming to someone else's expectations, because that's how we're all taught, or certainly people of my age group are taught, that you have to fit in. But if you have pushed back against that over the last few years, you could really get your rewards over the next 12 months. So the creative things that you've been working on with Uranus the last 5 years, full time, since March 2019 in your time, in your side, and Jupiter since May last year, can come together and crest up in quite a magical way. And you could get that dividend almost straight away, but it could keep giving over the next year. But I did mention about diet, and unfortunately when Venus and Jupiter are together in the second house, our desire for those really comforting foods is almost certainly to increase. So one of the things you may need to consider is upping your exercise routine in order to handle the vagaries of your sweet tooth. It's my big thing. I have a sweet tooth. And so Venus conjunct Jupiter in Gemini means that going out, being chatty, interactive, Gemini, with friends could be very pleasurable, but it's easy to start hoovering up all the nibbles and enjoying those lovely glasses of wine, and soon the pounds can pile on. So I'm just telling you that, but the pounds can pile on in a practical, productive and worldly way as well. So it is going to be very interesting for you, and the more you have really gone all in with Uranus and used Jupiter in a positive way over the last year, For sure, Pluto has been challenging you. There may be big shifts going on around your work, and you may be considering something different, but almost straight away, some kind of dividend can come to you, Taurus. So Gemini, I've been really excited to share this with you, but I feel like it's important to do this real justice, that we do need to look at the big picture, which is of course what Jupiter's about. And over the last year, Jupiter has been giving you an opportunity to create a healing balm from the disruption and at times difficult disruption that Uranus has been creating. Uranus in the 12th house is not a whole lot of fun, because Uranus is about sudden electric changes in energy, but the 12th house isn't always an area that any of us finds that easy to integrate. So some things may have happened in a very quick, unexpected way. There may have been some people that you thought you could rely upon that turned out to be suddenly out of your situation, and that's all been unsettling. Then when Jupiter came in a year ago, if you're someone with a deep sense of spirituality, that side of your nature has probably expanded hugely. If you're someone who's very aesthetic and likes to deal with facts, not the more ethereal plane, it's possible that Jupiter has just given you the encouragement to dig down and find out more of a practical nature, because Taurus, the host, very much to do with practicalities, being an earth sign, which has helped to take you to where you are now. But I feel that there has been quite a lot of learning going on, but learning more about your emotions, spirituality and psychology. Now the Sun has arrived in your sign, joined up by Venus, now Jupiter, and they're all angling to Pluto. Fantastic. And really you come centre stage. So whereas only recently you may have felt that you weren't necessarily being included as much as you should have been, or your skills weren't being acknowledged, suddenly you're hot property. And that's lovely, whether it's socially, whether it's professionally, whether it's in terms of just how you feel about yourself. But certainly having those three planets together, you know, it's very hard to resist the fact that this gives you a huge shot of confidence. And confidence is really important, because once the confidence is going, then the momentum starts to travel in a very upbeat way, and we create more confidence and so on. So something can occur for you over the next year that's very dynamic, but you know, it could occur almost straight away, particularly for someone who works with ideas. You know, you're a teacher, a trainer, a communicator, you work in technology. Suddenly what you've been saying and propagating for some while that may have seemed not to have been taken seriously, suddenly people are really wanting to engage with you, and I'm absolutely thrilled for you. So Cancer, the combination of Jupiter, Venus and the Sun in house 12 for you is going to bring about more of the Pisces Jupiterian energy over the next 12 months than the Sagittarian energy. And that Piscean energy has been very powerfully activated for you by Neptune over the last years in the sign of Pisces since 2012, but also more recently by Saturn. And that's been making you think a lot about some of your philosophies. The 9th house, very Sagittarian, but the 12th house, very Pisces. There's a kind of mutual receptivity. So over the next year, your interest in healing, anything to do with the psychological dimension, really reflecting very, very deeply about your whole life. If you are older, it's going to be a time of huge reflection, but also it can be a time of becoming much more conscious of new ideas and new ways of doing things. But you may not find yourself quite as outgoing and sociable as you have at times been with Jupiter in your 11th house. And of course, Uranus is going to continue in your sector of friendship, so that's continuing to push you and be a little bit provocative and ask you to think about who you're connecting with and why. But the 12th house in traditional astrology can be about those secret enemies. So just really being truthful with you, that you need to be aware that there could be some people who you're interacting with or set to interact with who may on the surface be incredibly pleasant and polite, but actually they don't have your best interests at heart. They may not want to do you down particularly, but just be aware of the facade of pleasantries. Pleasantries are all well and good. They do make the world go round. But if someone is being very smarmy and pouring the praise on, you need to be conscious of why that may be. Now, the other thing with the 12th house, and this is really, really interesting, it may not be so much to do with the healing dimension for you or the spiritual dimension. It could be something in your life is going to come to a close. So that could be a job that you've been very dedicated towards over a long period of time. It could be some lifestyle choices. It could be something that you found very alluring and very supportive at times when life's been a bit tough, that you find yourself thinking more about whether you want to withdraw from those artificial boosts. Now, whatever your poison is, that may be something that you could consider. But equally, because of Venus and Jupiter being together in the 12th house, you need to be aware of your modes of escapism. Because if the modes of escapism aren't good for you in a physical, emotional, or spiritual way, that's something to be mindful of as well. So it's not such an outgoing transition for you. And that's why it's very, very important with Jupiter not to just see it as being something that's always going to be sensational for every single sign. Every time it moves, everything's going to be wonderful. Sometimes I feel that YouTube astrologers paint Saturn and Jupiter as very binary. Saturn's all bad and Jupiter's all marvellous. But you know, in astrology, very often when Saturn moves over a cusp, that can provide a reward after a long period of hard work. And maybe this 12th house energy is going to be the reward of peace, quiet, tranquility. If you do separate yourself from a job that's been very arduous, or your kids are leaving home, or you decide to spend more time just being in nature, immersing yourself in your imagination, writing poetry, all of those things are marvellously positive, but not so much in a tangible way. So Leo, I'm getting really good vibes about this transition for you. As I've mentioned at a few junctures through the main video, that Jupiter cannot be seen as automatically positive wherever it is. It's just not that simple. But for you, the 11th house is about our higher desires. It's about where we can elevate our activities into an area that's even beyond the physical, success, goals, material gains, that flash car that we've always aspired to and so forth. The 11th house is better than that. And of course, it's linking with Pluto in your sector of relating. So there's going to be a network, a connection you're going to make over the next year, which is going to be profoundly important. It could be with an audience, it could be with some customers, it could be with a new best friend, it could be with a new partner. But whatever or whoever you connect with, it needs to be good for you in terms of the better part of your aspirations. The 11th house can also be very jolly and sociable. It's about friendships, it's about groups, networks, and you could find yourself at the heart of things. But Uranus is continuing in your 10th house, and that's work. That could still be an area where there's going to be some change. And of course, Saturn's in your 8th house, shared finance. So important to realise that with Jupiter and Venus together, that definitely creates opportunities, but not ones that we can sit on our backsides waiting to arrive at our front door. We need to be proactive. That's one of the downsides of Jupiter. The overconfidence can almost trick us into thinking that everything will be fine without any effort on our part. But if you are someone who has very strong idealism, if you are someone who really enjoys working with others, if you are someone who's involved in some kind of group or team that you feel very comfortable with, that could turn out to be an area that really grows in a very dynamic and exciting way over the next 12 months. So Virgo, you're very much part of the Jupiter story as well, in that your opposite sign of Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, therefore Jupiter's detrimented in your sign. But you can actually work with it very well, because what you do is bring your powers of discrimination, your care, your precision, which counterbalances that energy from Jupiter, which can be, look, everything could be all right. We don't need to check the details. Let's just crack on and get stuck in. And you're like, no, let's analyze this carefully, and then we can find out what the strengths and weaknesses are. So you're almost like the SWOT analysis of Jupiter. So good for you. But Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, which, like yours, mutable sign. So it's interesting, isn't it? All the Jupiter placements in the essential dignities, apart from Cancer, where it's exalted, and Capricorn, where it's in 4, all mutable. But for you, this energy in the 10th house could be really good if you've got younger family members who are looking to have children. So that can be something that could be blessed over the next year. It's also possible that your interaction with a local community organisation or any voluntary work you do can also bring you a lot of satisfaction. But the 10th house for many people will be how they make progress in the physical world, and also around career and work and business. And having this collection of energy all together could be very, very helpful, particularly as Pluto is pushing you to analyse some of the dedication and application and responsibilities you've taken on in recent years, and really check out, are you doing what's really good for you? So a change can be as good as a rest. Jupiter can be about experimentation in a way, certainly being bold. You've still got Uranus pushing you to be a bit more provocative in your approach and not just go for the status quo. So if you are wanting to raise your profile, gain greater recognition, seek out much more support for what you do or what you believe in, it could be a really sterling year in store for you. So Libra, as I mentioned in my introduction, for air signs, and particularly early born air signs, a really very dynamic year could be in store. So if you do have your sun or your ascendant early in Libra, or you have other planets in Libra, or you like to use whole sign astrology and see that the whole of Libra can be influenced by that collection of energy in Gemini, then it really is very, very positive looking. But particularly if you're someone who has something to say, particularly if you're interested in publishing, if that book that we all have supposedly within us is something that you want to manifest, or you want to go on that course, you didn't get the opportunities when you were younger to do higher education, you'd like to travel, you'd like to embrace a foreign language, learn how to play an instrument, anything to do with stimulating expansion. So for you, it's actually a very Sagittarian influence, but the host requires you to be busy and nimble in terms of getting the information to you quickly. So there's going to be a lot of exciting possibilities for you over the next year. I feel really sure about that. But it is a time when you need to be decisive, because one of the things with having your ruler Venus and Jupiter together in the 9th house is it all can seem very attractive. Having long chats about what you could do could seem very exciting, but not sitting on your hands is the key. And of course, a Libran tendency can be to weigh things up to such a degree that the opportunity can spin by. So you may have to push yourself a little bit, but that's where Pluto, in such a fantastic link with all three players of Jupiter, Venus and the Sun, in such a once-in-a-lifetime way, is really urging you to change things up if you're wanting to bring greater freshness, variety and stimulation to your existence. So Scorpio, the collection of energy in Gemini, particularly Jupiter, is really interesting for you because the 8th house is very reflective of your sign. It's about transformation. But the 8th house in a more practical way can be shared finance. It also can be things like legacies. And because Pluto in the 4th house, your modern ruler, is linking to Jupiter, Venus and the Sun, something to do with your family or to do with a property can be to your benefit over the next 12 months, but it may not be obvious at this time. Someone may have made some kind of consideration for you that you won't actually get to know about even within the next 12 months. But some thoughtfulness or deep planning could be part of the mix, or maybe you're thinking about these things. So if you've yet to set up, it's a difficult subject, but a will or investments for people when future forwards you may not be still here, this is a very, very good time for you to be thinking very carefully about those areas. But if you wanted to move, because of the 4th, 8th house energy, mortgage finance could be part of the picture, or a big loan, or a renovation, because the 8th house can be to do with, of course, rejuvenation and reincarnation in some ways. The 8th house can also be where we want to get up close and personal, intimate. Now that can be in a purely spiritual way, it can be financially through a business relationship, or it can be, of course, in a more intimate way too. So investment, devotion, those are things and themes, but the 8th house can also be about change. Let's think about Venus and Jupiter and the Sun together. They can actually be very much to do with perhaps investing in something that will give you a return. And you could have a stroke of fortune. You can also be fortunate by someone you're connected to being fortunate over the next year too, because the 8th house often brings luck through a partner as well. So Sagittarius, Jupiter, your ruler, in your opposite sign, linking with Venus and the Sun, and the part of fortune is in the mix as well. The 7th house is where we reach a connection with other people. With Pluto informing the whole equation, your thoughts, your mode of expression, your conviction, your passion, all of those, your beliefs, are all governed by Pluto in Aquarius. They're very important to the type of connections you could make over the next year. So it would be trivial to say that the connections are purely only romantic. But I have to say, that cluster of energy together, it's as good as it gets. The astrology is working to your advantage, particularly if you're born right at the start of Sagittarius. But obviously life isn't always as easy. The sky can inform the conditions. We still need to take the action. One of the downsides of Jupiter, and you when you're perhaps not on top form, is to kind of lack a little bit of drive to go for it. Maybe because it's better to stay sheltered, not take that risk, particularly around giving away your independence, because that's something you treasure, quite rightly. Just like Aquarius, you have a huge appreciation of independence. But if you do connect to someone or another group of people, it's possible that you can at this time really get just what you need, because the balance between what we need, which is the Sun, and essentially our ascendant, and where we connect to others, the 7th house, getting that pivot point in the middle is very, very difficult to achieve. But you may surprise yourself by the connections that you made in all sorts of ways over the next 12 months. And it could be really, really life enforcing, very, very lovely indeed. And it's not out of the equation that you could meet someone very special, or someone that has been part of your life that maybe you've been working out the practicalities. If you can both relax a little bit, who knows where it could go. Capricorn, the move of Jupiter into your 6th house. 6th house doesn't sound very sexy. 6th house is work, appointments, diet, organisation, can be to do with pets. If you're a real animal lover, you could have a lovely furry friend heading in your direction over the next year, and it could be just the tonic you need. The 6th house is very much to do with pets. It can also be to do with aunts and uncles, believe it or not. But those jobs, if you want to change, what all that energy in the 5th house has been showing you in recent times is you need to be creative. But being creative and heard is good. We still need to have a purpose. And the great thing about the 6th house is it's a purpose that has a purpose. So if you can find a role where you can help people, provide a service. Even if you're older, perhaps even retired in some kind of voluntary guise, interacting with people in a way that helps others can be very life enforcing for you. Now, because Pluto has been in your sign for so long, recently into the second, back into yours on the 1st of September, you're still juggling a little bit about your identity and how you then validate yourself, the second house, or earn money. But I feel that you could have a real opportunity to get into something that is a little bit more down to earth and practical, but is interesting, stimulates your mind, but you can help others. That could be an outcome over the next year. You could also find romance in the most absolutely practical of locations. I know it sounds cheesy, but if you are queuing up in the supermarket and somebody catches your eye, what Jupiter's basically saying to you is, look, sometimes we have to risk a bit to get that connection, and we can risk a rejection. But with Venus there as well, your charm, but most of all, your stunning sense of humour could be a great way to get chatting at the store, at the bus queue, at the health club, at the shop, the health shop. Just came to me, at the Whole Food store, at the counter of the chemist. A great place to spark suddenly. And that very practical location could be surprisingly positive for you over the next 12 months. So Aquarius, the great thing about Jupiter, Venus and the Sun, all moving into your fellow air sign of Gemini, is that it stimulates your 5th house, which is all about pleasure, joys, positivity. It's very sunny. It's kind of got a sun influence, the 5th house, because that's what the 5th sign is ruled by, Leo. And the 5th house is where we can really showcase our celestial personalities. So you're going to really sparkle, because Uranus has been causing such a lot of unsettled energy around home and emotion over the last 5 or 6 years. If you go back to May 2018, that square with Mars, right on the last degree of Capricorn, it then went into Aquarius, it was squaring up to Uranus. All of that 5 months was really, really difficult for early born Aquarians. And if you were unsettled by that, or Uranus's latter passage from March to 2019 deeper into Taurus, squaring up with your Sun or other personal planets, you've probably found there's been a lot of change around home, family, emotion, your environment, and it's been unsettling. But now you have a glorious opportunity. So I want you to imagine a huge set of lights that are going to go from red to green. It's like you're on the grid and you're just going to go forwards. Your dazzling personality, your uniqueness can be really celebrated. Stand in your power. Tell it large. You are going to be really, really convince yourself that you're really going to revolutionize your existence over the next year. And the reason I'm saying this is not because Jupiter's in Gemini. It's because Pluto is supporting Jupiter, Venus and the Sun. That's a mighty collaboration. The first, as I mentioned, for over 200 years, and with Mars in your 3rd house, as this event occurs, which in itself is very, very helpful. And this is your chance to really put the foot to the floor and really sparkle effervescently in all the delicious ways that you're capable of, which has been somewhat dimmed in recent years, I feel. So Pisces, the great news about this collaboration of energies in the sign of Gemini, it's all about home, emotion, family. If these are areas which have been interrupted by lots of different other factors in recent times, there can be some real blessings. If you'd like to bring someone into the world, for example, if you would like to get on the property ladder or rent your first apartment, or you would like to have a big family reunion, or you'd like to research your genealogy, or you would like to redecorate in a fundamental way, or you'd like to take up a hobby craft which you can do at home that's very satisfying. If you haven't seen relatives for many a moon, Perhaps because of COVID, perhaps because of the crunch around finances, some kind of happy celebration is definitely in the works. But with Pluto in your 12th house, the chances are you are being asked in some ways to quarry deep within yourself. And there may be some old memories, recollections, reminiscences that are going to inform the type of emotional environment you want. And you could surprise yourself, because Pisces people have a reputation of being hugely compassionate and giving and caring, and it's all true. But Pisces people can also be almost diametrically the opposite. If you don't feel really aligned to people or situations, you can cut off, withdraw, and be very cool and detached. And what perhaps this group of energy is saying, and of course Jupiter is your ruler, is encouraging you, particularly because Jupiter's forging an almost perfect link with your other ruler of Neptune, a sextile. It's really encouraging you to melt away some of those fears, that detachment, that coolness, because what it does is it keeps you safe, but it keeps you cocooned away, cut off, and it's not oxygenating you. Gemini is an air sign. Talk about your feelings. It will be really positive for you. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this Jupiter forecast. I'm wishing you all the best with it. But remember, if you've yet to subscribe, please support my channel and do so now.